Hello and welcome back to module number 5. Today we are going to go back a little bit about string, and we are going to talk about creating a string. We are going to talk about functions, and we will begin with module. What is a module? Basically, what is the purpose of module and why is it so similar to running a program in Python? In the end, I'm going to talk about GitHub. And the reason that I'm going to talk about GitHub is in order for you, one of the things that I get complaints from you, as you reported, that you asked me to review your code. Usually reviewing your code in blog is not a very straightforward and it's not very transparent. And so I use GitHub in my other classes, for example in R, in order for the students to have more access. GitHub is basically code repository, and the idea here is that I want you to become familiar with this idea that instead of you copy and sending your code to me and say what have I done wrong, or what's wrong with my code, you're going to post it on GitHub, and so I'll be able to access more easily without running into problems. But before I will start talking about modules, strings, function, etc., I want to start talking what I've done. I did a little revision of the schedule, class schedule, and the reason for that is that one of the things that when I talk to other instructors of Python from other university, one of the things that they often refers to as one of the important module in the class is the idea of teaching the students how to test their code. I did not talk about that yet, but module number 14 will be focusing on the subject of testing. What can you do to test your code and make sure that there is no issue with the code when you are going to create a program or you're going to create a module? So we will talk it at the end. In the meanwhile, in this module, I created for each subject that I'm going to cover, I created a separate page. So creating the string, what does it entail? And I also, in GitHub, I presented two videos, but I also applied how to apply GitHub to Python and what you need to do. So I hope it will help. I hope it will make sense. If not, please let me know. So let's begin. This is going to be a little bit longer module and a recording because I'm going to cover those three subjects. I'm not going to cover to the fullest, and I'm not going to run the code because of time constraint. I cannot talk for 2 hours. So what I will do is going to go over that. I will leave some of the parts as it is, and you will be able to go back to the canvas and go to see the examples that I post, so you will be able to have firsthand and be able to say this does not work or this work, and be able to work independently. I do apologize, this is an online class. So let's start with the basic. What is a module? A module is allowed you to logically organize your Python code. So it's the idea of grouping the code in a module that is easy to understand and use. So the idea here is that you created a module, which in this case, I call it a class.py. And in this case, I can update the file again and again, or refer to the class again and to the module again and again, and be able to show the progress I have made. So the module are simply text files that contains the Python definition and statements which execute directly or input to other modules. So basically it is definitions and statement, and I'm going to execute a global variable, and I'm going to show you what is it been done in order for me to apply it. And again, if I will apply that and I gave it definition and I gave it the if condition, which I have not yet discussed, but I will do that next time. And in this case, you will see how many students are in the class and what is the structure of the class itself. So the idea here is, again, how to apply it, how to apply the module. I saw many of you already use the module, the module in your assignment, which is great, and I highly want you to promote that in your honor for you to do that. We talked about the next subject is string. We talked about what is a string and what is it. Why is it so important? We talked about how to define the string. An example, it is a character simply represented as a string with one character, and we talked about how to apply to it and what does it entail. So when we are creating a string, example, this is a string, this is Python, so awesome, and so I can apply more specifically, I can apply more direct application on that string, and I will ask the Python, for example, 3, which is in this case will be 3 times s, and s will represent the end result of it. Or I can say 5 by 15, and so it will give me n is so AW. So those are the application or the thinking behind a string when we are doing it. So again, this is what is done. We can modify the string, we can apply that. The textbook talks about that quite a lot, so I highly recommend to review again the textbook, and again the plus and the multiplication and how to apply to it is really important. And one of the things that we need to talk about is the escape characters supported by Python string. The most common one is new line or space or tab, which is really important. When you're going to create a string with a lot of characters, for example, not one sentence, but a whole chapter, you will need to start organizing it, and by using escape characters, you can create new line, you can create space, or you can create tab. When you are talking about building in a string methods, you usually have the ability to apply, example, methods that allow us to sort the data better. So in this case, again, I showed end s.lower, and I said s_lower is the case, and it is the idea what it contains and how to apply to it to the string that I already created. So those are the examples that I outline, and again, you can find that in your textbook, and I will highlight that again in your assignment. So again, other techniques and other methods to build in a string methods in order for you to, example, split the string, or ability to apply to it, or how to build on it, or what type of analysis you can build in order for you to demonstrate the idea. So those are the examples. I want you to go over that. Again, I'm not going to go over specifically. I'm not going to show it example by example because you're going to have the PowerPoint. You will do that in your time. I want to move on along, and again, storing how to store the model is, again, I showed you a link to the idea of how to apply to it. So you have all the documentation, and I hope it is understood, and you hope it makes sense. So again, how to string context and how to apply to it. Again, I'm giving you all the things that you need in order for you to apply and develop. Okay, so this is the idea of string which we talked about. I think this is a cover up of what I missed the last time. I want to start today about functions. And functions, again, is when a function executes, a new space name is created, which is local space name. So new namespace can also created by module class or module as well, methods as well. And so the idea here is that when we are using functions, we have different types of function. We have local that runs in a local machine, but we also have a global namespace that allows us to apply to all spaces. Doesn't mean where it is located. So in this case, build it within is the sign of build in a module. If it fails, it's name error. So a function is a first class object. So when we are talking about what does it mean, in short, it means that whatever you do with a variable, you can do it with a function. That includes assigning a name to it, passing it as an argument to a function, returning it as a result of a function, storing it as in data structure, etc. So let's take an example. Define make ink, defined ink, and again I have a first class object here which can be wrapped as a function within functions. So again, those are the functions that I'm using in order for me to disclose what I'm trying to achieve in my function in order for me to apply, and will present in the memory in order for us to do that. Closure is another way to follow those three rules for generating a closure. We must have nest function inside the function. We have to have a nest function must refer to a value defined in a closing function, and it has to return to the nest function. So in order for me to illustrate that, I'm going to start with say hello, and you all experience that, and going to say hello, and the string I'm going to say the name. But I'm going to add to it another dimension, another decorporate, and I'm going to apply to it in order for us to say what is the name and how to apply to it. And again, he will say, when I said print, he will say hello John in order for us to operate the entire set. So I have two def definitions, which is the return of the functions, and it is return of the function as the cause of it. This is the closer of the function, and this is how it been done. So what kinds of things can you decode for? Timing for the execution, memorization, logging purposes, debugging, and pre and post function process, and we're going to see some of it later on. So again, back to my example and to what I have said, and look at that as when we are saying say hello, and I'm going to declare the rate say hello, and I'm going to ask it to print, and it will print the following, hello John, in order for us to do that. So again, the syntax and everything is outlined for you, so you are able to understand what it is and what is it consists of. And the issue is you have the ability to track the closest decor to the function definition being applied first, and you're going to see what is it entail. So again, example that I outlined for you in order for you to apply, and where to see the closer of that and see more closer out of it. I gave you, let's say you want to create a purpose decor for the common operation of checking validity of function argument types. And this is really important because, example, import math, I'm going to ask the Python to run mathematical math for me. I'm going to say complex, I will give it a name, and I will say that I want the Python to do math dot square root of z dot array multiplied by 2 plus z dot image multiplied by 2. So again, this is what it will come up with in order for it to operate, in order for it to generate a number that it will all operate on. And in the end, the complex magnitude will be 1 plus 2g, and it will give me a number. Accept example, again, see how it will accept and how to check arguments. And this will come back to us in module number 14 when we are going to start testing your code and see what is it entail. One of the things that in function we are often talk about is OOP, which is the idea that it is very similar to what is C++, but it is easy for you to pick up the ideas behind the class structure. So the class definition is class name and class statement 1, statement 2, and we will declare and to use it. And we can say in class my class, and I'm going to say hello. And so I can create a new instance of my class using similar function notation. So in this case, x is equal to my class in order for me to represent what it will eventually capture. So I can access the attributes and the method of my object in the following way. And I can define the special methods which automatically involve in new instance. And by doing that, I'll be able to say hello to the world. Another example, and again, different structure of my composition. And in this case, I'll use the Y as my class. And I will say just create my class object. And by doing that, I'm going to use the init function. And by do so, I can create the complex and be able to apply. I can use data attributes. Example, I can apply specific type of data in order for you to do that. I would ask you to apply that. I did not give it to you as an assignment. I want you to start thinking about the data that the Python can accept and apply in order for you to do that. And again, use it as an example for that and how to apply that. Mathematical data, for example, here, I can apply to it and generate out of it. Variables with a class, again, it can be done, and this is the way for us to do that. Class dog, and I can give it some definition or attributes, and by doing that, I can give it different names, and I can use the following example, and in order for us to apply and to trick or to create classes out of those variables. I can also, one of the things that Python is really strong at is building it in attributes. So if you have a namespace, you can add to your dictionary attributes such as name class, or doc, which is class documentation string, or none is if undefined, and you can apply object namespace. So all those things are attributes that can help you make your case or make your code a little bit stronger as it is. Methods, one we can call method of a class object using a similar function called notation. So again, in this example, I defined what is calling x dot f is equivalent to by calling the class my class dot fx, and by doing that I can do it and define it by itself. One of the things that is really important, I did not talk about a simple function class. I highly recommend that you will visit Bob Meyer's simple class. It's really good example. I did not post it on Canvas because I thought you would do that, but look at that, look at this example and see how we apply into it to declare definition of a fraction in the class in order for you to generate a little bit more advanced idea of it and how to apply to it. I copy of his code a little bit just to make sure that you understand the input aspect of the function. I can import the method out of it and be able to execute, to evaluate, and be able to set. I can also have a class that defines pet object, and by doing that I can use the pet object. I can define the self, name, and age. I can define the selfish. I can define the age and the name, and by doing that I'm basically building in function that defines when happens when I print an instance of pet. I also try to incorporate in my example overriding it and to print the name again. So again, part of the examples, part of the idea, what it is entails. I also try to talk about a little bit more about what is it in the class that I can evaluate or add an additional value to it. And so I gave you the example, I gave you an outline, and I want you to try to run it and see what you think of it and how to apply to it. You can also have a multiple intent into it, and you can have statement 1 and statement n, and by doing that you can have all those issues. I'm backing up a little bit because I know that I'm taking you so far. I'm talking to computer and not live persons. So I'm going to talk also about private variables. So there is no notation of private attributes in Python. And so if you will see, there is no more than one trailing underscore is automatically replaced with underscore class name underscore name. So the bottom line, if you want other development to treat it as private, you will use the appropriate prefix in order for them to identify what is a private variables inside your code. So basically it brings me to the name, the idea of name, component of the whole structure, and mapping in this example what is the problem in this code. And if you look at that, or if you will try to see it, I have two definitions. I have for and in, and then I have a class and mapping subclass in order for you to do that. So the update method of mapping accept one irrigate object as its argument, but the update method of the mapping subclass, however, accept key and value as an argument. Because it's divert from the mapping and we have not override the methods into it, we have an error which can call update in the single arguments. So this is the argument, this is the error that we might run into in order for us to apply or to find in order for us to do that. So I gave you a few examples. I want also to talk about structure, and I know that I do not mention it in the overall performance because I'm going to go over it fast. So you can sockets are defined using a format of string, like a mini language that allowed us to define the argument of the variance C types, such as car, inter, and long, as well as undefined variable. So the idea in this example is that you can create an example of an object using an empty class in order for you to operate on it, in order for you to apply to it and develop it. I will talk it. This is my selling point to our next class. I will talk more about that next time, and I will give you an assignment how to do that. In your assignment for this class, I outline. Now the computer does not work. That's great. Okay. So in the assignment module, I gave you a really easy assignment. And the whole point of it is that I want you to write a program or module to execute a string within the Python code. So for example, I want you to see what it is entail and run it. And one of the things that number 3 is to write a function to insert a string in the middle of the string. And in this example, I gave you how I did it. I want you to see if it works for you. If you understand the structure, I want you to see explanation what it is. So this is my upcoming class. And I will talk about that later on next time. Okay, so now the last subject is GitHub. And I recommend you to apply or to see the 2 videos that I posted on Canvas on GitHub, which are really nice that they give you a structure, what it is. I will try to make sure that you understand. And again, the GitHub functions, again, you need to get away from the Python, and you're going to start with configuration of the terminal in order for you to start the process. And I need to give you a little bit of history about GitHub. GitHub was developed in Linux, and it came out as a way to store or support nonlinear development. And the majority of the project are used in GitHub are Unix functions. So there is modules that usually how we distribute it. We have 2 computers that can contribute to a centralized model. In comparison, in distributed model, where GitHub is really famous, it's not one application. We can have more dimensions with regard to the cooperation between the code and how the code is being applied. The snapshot that GIF allowed us to give is the ability to have version 1, version 2, version 4, and version 5, and so on of the code in order for us to make sure that the code is correct and can be runnable. So again, GIF uses checksum, and it allowed us to see what it is. And so a local project has 3 areas: working directory, the area itself, and the GitHub directory. So you can usually you modify the files in your local directory where you're going to work. And when you commit it to the files, it will go up to the repository on the web in order for it to be saved. So there basically is a file life cycle going on here that allowed us to store and update the idea behind it. So when you modify the working class, you can stage files, you can add snapshot of them. You do not you do a commitment, and by doing that, it will go directly to your storage directory and be able to review it. So aside what is the GitHub does, it is a storage repository, and it allowed us to have ability to store information. Question that I often receive: can I have used GitHub to use GIF? No, you can use GIF completely locally for your own purpose, or for you or someone else to get a server file or get the idea what is it entail. So get use, and again, how do you apply the GitHub in your terminal and not the application? You need to set up the terminal and get config to a global user, and example Bugs Bunny, and you're going to give it a name. One of the other options, which might be easier for most of you, is to download the application, the GitHub application. In my example, I have a lot of files, and I did not sort my files correctly, and because I'm working on several projects at the time, and I'm also teaching a lot of students, so I do apologize. But what you're going to see here is basically what my files going to see in GitHub. You see that I have some files going on and some license check and so on. So this is based on my repository, and this is where you're going to post your code. You're going to create a repository with your name. You're going to post the code using the GitHub, and it will look like something like this. This is in R, and this is my code, and as you can see, it will allow me to view the code, to copy the code, to run the code, even though I'm not the creator of the code, and that will help you to write better Python code. I hope it makes sense. I hope it makes sense to use the GitHub in Python, because there's a lot of Python codes stored in GitHub. And again, I know that I covered quite a lot today. I know that it was not as straightforward as I should have, but I gave you the file backup in Canvas so you'll be able to see how to create the application, how to apply it, and what does it entail. So all of it is posted on Canvas, so you will have the ability to see what is the modules, how to apply, how to import from a module, and basically everything that you need in order for you to be successful. Until next time, I hope you enjoy it. Please let me know if you have any other questions. Until next time, have fun. Whew.